Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 2 of my July wrap-up. So first I'm going to mention 3 books where only one of these I read actually in July, but I need to mention these at some point, and that is for my first TBR swap that I did. This one was with my friend Katie from A Sea of Tomes, and I think this video might actually be going up before that one. So if you watch the wrap-up first, you're gonna, I guess, know the surprise of which book she sent me, but I don't want to spend a ton of time wrapping these up because I did it very extensively in that vlog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize the books, and then I'm going to link to the timestamp in the vlog where I actually do the review for those, since not everybody likes reading vlogs, so that's what I'm going to do. So I have The Turning by Emily Whitman. This is a fantasy novel, a contemporary fantasy novel. We're following our main character, who's a boy named Aaron, and he is a Selkie, but he is waiting for the turning to happen. And the turning is when a Selkie becomes able, they get their seal skin, so they're able to turn back and forth between a human and a seal or a Selkie. And Aaron has not had that happen yet, and Aaron doesn't know why that hasn't happened. He's feeling very alone. Nobody else is really going through what he is. And then when he starts finding out some things that might explain this, he gets really upset, and he ends up, actually, because of some other things that happen, he ends up going to land for a while. And the book is about the friends that he meets there, the people he meets there. It's about Aaron learning more about himself and his past and trying to fit in between these two different worlds. Next is Secrets of Shakespeare's Grave by Darren R. Hicks. This is the first book in the Shakespeare Mystery series, and our main character is a girl named Colophon, and her family own a publishing firm that is very prestigious, but recently it has not been doing very well. Some accidents keep happening and they're losing a lot of money, and Colophon ends up finding out about this old family treasure that if she can find that, this might help her save the family business and everything. And she ends up, her and a cousin end up going on an adventure, putting together these clues, trying to find this family treasure, and there are some Shakespeare elements in this one as well. And then the last one is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, and this is a kind of historical research mystery take on the Vlad the Impaler / Dracula story. And yeah, it involves a lot of traveling around Europe. Our main character is an unnamed girl or young woman. Maybe she's older at the time that she's telling the story, but she's recounting, there's multiple layers of this story, and her father had become involved in the search for Dracula, trying to figure out what happened to Vlad the Impaler, and then she kind of gets brought into that a little bit, and there's a lot of different people who are involved with trying to track down and unravel these clues and this mystery, and trying to combat this threat. That's a very bad summary, but so yes, please check out that video to see my thoughts on all 3 of these. I will of course link Katie down below as well, and also, again, I don't know when these are going up, but if you want to see the books that I sent her, then check out the vlog that she is posting, so all those links will be down below. So the first book I'm actually going to wrap up in this video is Rumaysa by Radia Hafiza, illustrated by Raida El Touni, and this is a very short collection of 3 fairy tales that are all featuring Muslim main characters, and this was absolutely lovely. So on the cover you can see Rumaysa, let down your hijab, and yeah, I just so one of them is, I'll just tell you the 3 stories. Rumaysa, which is a take on Rapunzel, Cinderella, which is a take on Cinderella, and Sleeping Sarah, which is a take on Sleeping Beauty, of course. And I just thought this was lovely. I loved the focus on friendship, especially friendship between girls, and helping each other and everything. I think my favorite main character is definitely Rumaysa. I really enjoyed her, but my favorite of the 3 stories was Cinderella. I really enjoyed that one, and I also really liked the really interesting things that Radia Hafiza did with some of the side characters throughout these stories, and yeah, I just think this is a really lovely collection. I love that this is out there, and I gave Rumaysa 4 stars. The next book I finished was That Thing About Bollywood by Supriya Kelkar, and this is a story following our main character Sonali, and her parents seem to be heading towards a divorce, and she's really not happy about that. It's very hard on her and her brother, and yeah, there's a lot of tension in their family. And then one day Sonali wakes up and everybody, it's they're in a Bollywood movie. There's musical numbers that happen out of nowhere. Things are really bright, and the colors are different and everything, and everyone is just acting like this is normal and this is the way things have always been. And so the story is about Sonali trying to figure out how that happened, why this has happened, and trying to come to terms with her parents' decision and how their family is going to change, kind of processing these changes emotionally and everything. And also about Sonali learning that asking for help is okay, and that having emotions is also okay. If you saw my last wrap up, which I will also link down below, you will recognize I happened to read several books in the same month that dealt with the fact that showing your emotions is not a bad thing, which I did not do on purpose, but I don't think it's an accident that those books tend to work for me. So anyway, I really like the Bollywood elements. I think some of those were really fun and entertaining, while I also think this book did a good job showing how freaky it would be if like your world was suddenly vastly different and everyone was acting like you're the weird one for remembering it differently. Like that was actually, I think that was very well done. I think the cultural elements and the cultural discussion was really good. I also really liked that there was some brief discussion of how even things that you mean to be a compliment can be very like othering or kind of like insensitive, and it was done in a very like kid appropriate way. Like one of the other kids in her class says something about Bollywood movies where like they thought they were saying that they liked them, but it kind of came off, well, like it came off offensive basically. So I really like that inclusion. I think the themes again were really, really well done, like the importance and the value of like talking about your feelings and processing those. And I really, really love the focus on how like asking for help when you need it is a strength. Like that is not a weakness. Needing other people and like having other people to lean on is important. And I think that discussion was really well done. There's a part in particular that was very emotional, about a family member who was sick and could have really used some emotional help and support, but because of this feeling of pride that other family members had, they were unable to get that. So I think that was just like very well discussed. And yeah, like overall I liked this. There was a really big thing though that kept me from like enjoying this book as much as I could have, and I feel kind of bad because I don't think this is the fault of the author, because I know authors don't write the synopses for their books, but the summary implies that Sonali figures out pretty soon why this whole Bollywood thing is happening and like how she can fix it. She does not realize that, like in the actual book, she does not figure that out until there's like 30 pages left of the book. Like it's at the very, very end. And it was just really frustrating because like not only were we seeing Sonali like just not get the solution when we already knew the solution, like we were watching this for a long time, it also made some like plot sequences kind of repetitive, and it also was just very stressful because like the stakes are really high in this book. Like the consequences if Sonali can't like figure this out and get the world back to normal are pretty dire, especially for like how fun the premise sounds, which I actually like. I think it's an interesting choice to have those high stakes. Like I didn't mind that, but combined with a really like frustrating experience waiting for the main character to figure it out, it like wasn't fun. So I ended up giving that Thing About Bollywood 3.75 stars. There was a lot I liked here, but the whole experience was just so much more frustrating than it needed to be. And again, like I feel bad because I think at least part of it is because of my expectations from the synopsis, but I also just think that the story could have been maybe structured a little differently, or that element could have been handled differently. So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this one, but just go in knowing that it takes a while before like Sonali figures out that piece. Next, I finally read Root Magic by Eden Royce. A lot of people have been praising this one, and I absolutely understand why. This was absolutely fantastic. So this is a historical novel set in, I think it's the 1960s. Yes, 1963. And we're following our main character, Jez, short for Jezebel. Her and her twin brother live with their mother and I think their uncle. I'm pretty sure it's their uncle. And their grandmother has just recently died at the beginning of the story, and Jez and her grandmother were really close. Like their whole family was very close. So they're dealing with that. And Jez and her brother Jay are starting to learn from their uncle the practice of root magic, which is like healing, and also like there's a spiritual component as well, and like herbal remedies and things like that. And some people in their community really don't trust that. They really treat Jez and her family badly because of this, because of like how they view root magic, and they view it as this really bad thing. Jez and her family also have to deal with racism, and yeah, this book is just fantastic. The actual storyline was very different than what I thought it was going to be. For some reason I had gotten it into my head that it was going to be a book about Jez and her brother like moving to a new community and then like learning from their family members like this practice of root magic, and they don't move, they stay there. And I actually really liked that because I really liked the setting and how connected this family are to the place that they live. I just really love the family in general. Like those family relationships I think were really, really well written. I expected like Jez and Jay's relationship, like as siblings, to be a little more prominent. Like I still liked it, but I was expecting that to be the main focus. But really, it was just like a focus on lots of different kinds of family relationships, which I really liked. There's also some discussion of segregation in schools because this book is set right after the Brown versus Board of Education court decision that mandated desegregated schools. Of course, it didn't happen immediately after that, but that had happened, and that's like kind of the time frame this book is taking place during, so that was discussed as well. There's also a focus on education like itself, like the importance of education, which I really liked. I also just loved Jez as a main character, and I loved the writing of this book, and she's the narrator. Jezebel is the narrator, and I, like, from the first couple chapters even, I was like already so into this book because I loved Jez and her voice and like the writing style and everything. I also really admire her and like how she has lines that she will not cross, and even when she is learning this this practice that has been handed down by people in her family and in her community for generations, she will interpret things differently or do things differently while honoring where the traditions came from, but she will make changes based on what she knows is right. There were also a few like really spooky parts that I think were really, really well done. Like I think the atmosphere of those was really great. And I also, this is another book, this is just like something that I like in books where there were some elements that I had kind of figured out or I had like guesses about, and then there were others that I didn't see coming, and I just think that balance was really good. And also this is a book where I don't think the enjoyment or like the quality of it hinges on you not knowing certain things that are going to happen. Like I don't think that affects this book at all. And anyway, I can just add my recommendation to the many, many, many other people's because I loved this and I gave Root Magic 5 stars. Next, I finished Caroline Bingley by Jennifer Becton. The subtitle is A Continuation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, which that is exactly what this is. As you probably guessed from the title, this one is following Caroline Bingley. And I really liked this. I have always felt just the tiniest bit bad for her in the original story. Like, she's terrible. I'm not saying she's a nice person, but there's like one specific thing about like her feelings for a particular character that I always felt just the tiniest bit bad for her about. So I've always kind of like had that in the back of my mind. And I was really excited when I heard about this retelling that focuses on her as the main character, and after her treatment of some characters in Pride and Prejudice, she's basically, like this book, she's basically sent to live with her family in like minor disgrace, basically. Like it's kind of intended as like a punishment until she like apologizes to the people she offended. And Caroline does not want to apologize to these people. She doesn't think she did anything wrong, and she thinks that these people are beneath her anyway. And like, how dare her brother send her away? And so that's kind of where we start this book. And then like one of the main conflicts of the story is when Caroline, well, first of all, it's like her being back home and having to reconcile her town life and like the facade she kind of put on with where she actually comes from and like her family and the people that she knows. It deals like with class a lot. And also a part of the conflict is when Caroline starts developing feelings for somebody who is not very eligible, and she's like trying to make herself she's trying to like get a proposal of marriage from this very eligible man, but she starts getting feelings for somebody else, for a different guy. And it's about how like I just find that concept so interesting. Like, can Caroline's views on marriage as a business transaction and like a way to elevate yourself in the world, are those going to hold when she's the one actually having to make this decision to give up somebody that she does care about in exchange for a better social position? So I feel like that was a very long synopsis, but that concept really, really intrigued me. And I'm happy to say that I also think the execution was really good. There were a couple of things that I didn't love as much, and I'll actually start with those. One was there were a few bits of the writing that felt a little bit overdone. Like, I think overall the tone felt very like very period appropriate, and it wasn't distracting with how like modern it felt or anything. So I actually think the writing was really well done. There was just a few places where I feel like Jennifer Becton maybe piled on a little bit too much of the like, I don't know, like vocabulary of the era or something. Like it felt a little like it was trying too hard in a few places, but overall I did like the writing. And then the other thing related to the writing is I think like the characterization and like the backstory of Caroline Bingley was like front loaded a little bit too much. Like I feel like it almost felt like the author was like rushing to kind of explain why Caroline did the things she did right at the beginning of the book, when it's like I think the rest of the book is strong enough that we would pick up on that ourselves. Like I think that could have been spread out throughout the book more, but overall again I did like the writing. And then the only other thing that I had kind of mixed feelings about was like the actual love interest. It's one of those cases where like he should have frustrated me a lot more than he did because he's much more cocky than I tend to like, and I would have liked Caroline to win a few more of their arguments, but for some reason it still worked for me, and I think one of the reasons is because Caroline does almost nothing but give people set downs in the original Pride and Prejudice novel, so I feel like, I don't know, maybe this book felt like it was just balancing that out a little bit. It didn't bother me too much, and then the other thing that I think fixed that for me, besides, again, I just liked some of their conversations and their dynamics. Like, when he wasn't being a jerk, I actually liked them together. And then also there's like something that that character does near the end of the book that like I really liked and that really like sold me on them, and I think really like convinced me about their character, like for the better. So anyway, those are like the things I had issues with, but now I'm going to talk about the things I really liked. Like I said a few times, like the concept and the plot for this just really worked for me. This was something that appealed to me, and I also feel like the execution was really well done. Again, overall, I liked the writing. I really liked Caroline as a main character, and this perspective on her was so interesting. Again, I liked the thematic discussions of class, and there was this one part that I loved. I thought was like so interesting. So Caroline, like the reason, there's like a specific thing she does that is kind of the reason that she gets sent away in, again, minor disgrace. And there's a moment where Caroline recognizes why the character that she did this to was acting the way they did. Like she says that like in the world that women are growing up in, they are taught to do everything they can to like help themselves and their family in life by like finding a good marriage. So the way that that character behaved, nobody could fault them for. But Caroline also points out that like the way that women, like sisters, are raised is to protect their brother from women who are trying to do that. And so Caroline like points out kind of the hypocrisy of people blaming, like people thinking badly of her for doing what they're all kind of raised to do. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but it was really interesting. Again, not that Caroline is like a terribly nice person in the original novel, but I think that perspective was very interesting. And then speaking of kind of like explaining Caroline's behavior, I really like that element of this book. One of my favorite things in like Jane Austen retellings is when you find out backstory that Jane Austen didn't write, but that fits like seamlessly into what she did write. Like there are a lot of places in this book where it's like, yeah, I can see how if Caroline did have this like recurring shame about their family being new money, which you get hints of, I think, in the original novel, like if you accept that, then there's a lot of other explanations for her behavior that I think are really interesting. And like I can really see how people would perceive that as being snobbery, when in reality it's like snobbery that's hiding feelings of inferiority. So I just thought that was really interesting. I also really loved some of the side characters, like Caroline's mother and Caroline's like companion or maid, who she's like she has kind of like forced on her. They're developing like interactions were very, very interesting, and I really liked her maid as a character. And again, I think this book has some really interesting things to say about women's limited options in this time period. Like Caroline, in a lot of ways, is much better off than like, for example, the Bennet sisters in Pride and Prejudice, but her options are still not great. Like, she's in a much better position, but she still is very restricted in the things that she can accomplish in the world, the ways that she can take care of herself. Essentially, it comes down to marriage, and she has a better chance than the Bennet sisters because she is wealthy and she is like of a higher standing in society. But it really does feel like in a lot of ways like the same dilemmas, which I thought that was really interesting. And then I also really loved the epilogue of this book. I think that was really good. It went a long way towards me like fixing some issues I had with some of the last scenes of the book, and also my opinions on certain characters. So I really liked the epilogue. Anyway, I feel like I talked about this book a lot, but I really enjoyed it. I think if this concept interests you, I think you could really enjoy this one. And I gave Caroline Bingley 4 stars. Next, I finished The Lady or the Lion by Amna Qureshi, and actually several of these books in this wrap-up you will have heard me talk just a little bit about in my currently reading update where I did a Get Ready With Me. I will link that if you're interested. But yeah, so this is a Pakistani-inspired fantasy that is also inspired by the short story The Lady or the Tiger by Frank R. Stockton. And we're following our main character, Dorkhanai, who is a princess, and at the beginning, or like prior to the start of the novel, there was a political attack where some people were actually assassinated, and the other countries in this area, or the other kingdoms, are blaming Dorkhanai's kingdom for that. And so as a show of goodwill and to prove their innocence, Dorkhanai's kingdom, and it's currently being run by her grandfather and grandmother, so she's the crown princess, but she's not actually ruling the country yet. So their country has opened their capital city to ambassadors for the first time in like ages. Like they don't generally let people from other places in, and so the ambassadors are here, but then it looks like these attempts at peace are beginning to be sabotaged, and so Durkanai ends up having to work together with one of the ambassadors who like, his name is Asfandyar, and he admits, like the first time I think he meets Durkanai, he admits to her face that he's a spy. So she obviously has mixed feelings about him, not sure if she can trust him, but the two of them end up having to work together to try and figure out who is sabotaging these attempts at peace, to figure out who actually did commit the political attack / assassinations, and also there's an illness going around too that they're trying to figure out what's going on with that and to help people. So this was like a really interesting reading experience. You might remember this was one of my most anticipated releases for the whole year, and I did enjoy this. There were a couple of things I didn't like as much, but this was like a really interesting book and I did like it, and I'm glad I read it, and I really want people to read this one because like I want to know what other people think too. So there were a few things that I think worked some of the time and then didn't work other times. Like the writing and like descriptions and everything was one of those where like sometimes we would get these really beautiful passages, some really great descriptions, really great dialogue, and then other places it felt kind of clunky. So I feel like that could vary quite a bit throughout the book. And then also like the actual political machinations of this book, I had mixed feelings on as well, because I feel like there was not as much like political maneuvering as I expected, or it wasn't as like interesting as I expected, but I think that actually makes sense because Durkanai, like she's kind of a like spoiled but well-meaning princess who like she does really care about her people and she has been working to help them before this, but a lot of the book is about her realizing how little she knows about what's going on in her kingdom, and she's trying to do better. So it makes sense that she's not like super familiar with these political games and everything. So I think that does make sense, but that is something to know going in. And then I really liked the characters, and like I really enjoyed Durkanai as a character, and I really liked the chemistry between her and Asfandyar. That was one of the things that really like I think was really important for my enjoyment for this book, because a lot of the book does rest on their dynamic and caring about what happens with the two of them, and I did really enjoy that. My first impression of him was not favorable, but as the book went on I really liked some of their scenes together. And I also think this book had a really, really stellar prologue. Like that opening chapter was brilliant. I tend to hate prologues, but this one was, I think, really, really well done. So I really liked that as well. And yeah, so like I did enjoy a lot of things about this book. Some of my issues though, besides a couple of the like writing things I already mentioned, I had some issues with the ending. Like I think there were some character motivations that really just didn't make sense to me. And I didn't like that, because that was like, those were pretty pivotal moments that I just didn't really buy into. Again, they just didn't make sense to me. And then another issue I had is the way that Durkanai and her kingdom are kind of characterized. Like the word barbarian is used a lot, and it was interesting because like I happened to be reading about the original story that this book is partly inspired by. I read about that after I finished it, and apparently that is a reference to the original story. Like they use, Frank R. Stockton uses that description a lot, like the word barbarian, and it was just interesting. So like I'm glad I knew that that was like a reference, but I still think the way it was used in this book was like a little off-putting, because there were some cases like they're talking about the like practice that this kingdom has for like trial and execution, which like, yes, fair game, that is really messed up. But there were some places where it was used to describe like Durkanai as a person, and like especially like the way that she would act in certain situations where like, again, like the word, it was like, oh, her barbarian nature was making her like do certain things, and I didn't really like that. That rubbed me the wrong way, and I just wish that had been done differently, or like that we just hadn't even used that descriptor for her, or for like her kingdom. Because yeah, I didn't like that. And for contrast, there were other elements of this book that like harmful things were shown in such a way that it was clear they were bad. Like Asfandyar is biracial. One of his parents is black, and this book does deal with anti-blackness and like the racism that he experiences. Like that is an element of this book, and that is something that is shown in such a way that it is clearly not okay. So yeah, like just the whole barbarian thing, I wish that had been done differently. And then my other issue is like related to the ending of this book, and this might depend on how the sequel goes, because maybe that'll be addressed then. But basically I feel like there were certain character decisions that were forgiven way too quickly. Like I don't think they should have been forgiven at all. I thought we were heading to a point where there would be like this realization about this character like not being good, and then like that didn't happen, and I'm like, did I misunderstand something, or are we supposed to think more badly of the character who forgave this person, or is this building up to the second book? I don't know what's going on with that. I feel like that was a very vague description because I'm avoiding spoilers, so I'm sorry for that. But anyway, yeah, so like I did like this overall. I gave The Lady or the Lion 3.75 stars, and I'm very interested to see where the sequel goes. Next, I finished a play, and that was Deathtrap by Ira Levin. This is a play with only a few characters. We follow like our main character. One of our main characters is this man who is a writer. He's, I think, like middle-aged, and he's a playwright who writes like thrillers and like for the stage, and he has been very successful. He's very well known and respected, but he hasn't had a hit in a long time. And the play kind of starts with the premise of like, what is he willing to do to get this next play? Like, is he perhaps willing to murder somebody when he comes across this like really, really promising manuscript? And that's kind of like the setup for the play, and this was interesting. I liked it. I know some people who like this is one of their favorite plays, and it's not one of my favorite plays, but I did enjoy it. I really think the dialogue was super clever, and that actually kind of bumped the rating for me a little bit, because if I weren't really, like, if the writing weren't so good, this probably would have been a 3.5 stars for me, just because this is not quite my taste in like mysteries or plays even, but the writing was great, so I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Do keep in mind, I don't remember when this was written. It was a few decades ago. Like, there's some like social issues that are not handled the best, or like the most like sensitively. Like the way they're used as tropes, I think, is definitely not how they would be used today, so do keep that in mind. But I did have fun with this one. I think it was really engaging. It did kind of fall into that trap for me of like certain plot elements being exciting but making the story make less sense, which was one of the reasons why I said like this is not quite my taste for like mysteries, but I am glad I read this. I also watched the movie version, which was interesting. But yeah, I did like this. I feel like I keep saying like la la la, but yeah, I liked it. So I'm sorry for how repetitive that is. And I think one of my favorite parts was actually like the meta elements. Like if you're somebody who is like interested in theater at all or enjoys theater, I like that for me was like one of the most fun aspects of this play was like the, not even commentary, what am I trying to say? It's like the extra enjoyment that comes from knowing about plays and then reading this play that deals with other plays. It sounds way more confusing than it is. But yeah, so 4 stars. Did enjoy that one. And then I next finished I Speak Boy by Jessica Brody. This is a middle grade contemporary retelling of Emma, so another Jane Austen retelling. And I really like this. Our main character is a girl named Emmy, and some plot things happen that cause her to wake up one day and realize that she has an app on her phone called I Speak Boy, which translates what boys say into like what they really mean. And so Emmy starts using this to, like, she's very into like matching people up because this is an Emma retelling. And so she starts using this to like matchmake the people in her school. And predictably things start going wrong. And yeah, I did really enjoy this one. I mentioned in that Get Ready With Me that one thing that really worked for me about this book, because Emma is my least favorite Jane Austen novel, which, you know, is still a great book, but it's my least favorite. And one thing that really works for me about this book is some things that I really don't like about the novel and character Emma work much better when it's like a 12-year-old who's doing them. Like, they make much more sense, and it's much easier to take some of her behavior and choices when she's 12 years old. So I think that was like a really smart narrative decision. And I really liked some of the side characters. Like, I thought the Mr. Knightley character was really fun. I thought the app was like a really interesting kind of speculative twist, like just a little bit of one. So I thought that was interesting, and I really liked the way, like, this is another thing I mentioned where I hoped the book would do this, and I think it did, where it really engages with the ethics of this app and like of being able to know what somebody is thinking or like what they really mean when they say something. And it also, I think this book does a really great job of like talking about like middle school crushes, and like I mentioned before, like I think that it really taps into like if you were somebody who did get crushes in middle school, that feeling of like where you're that age when you're starting to get them but you're not sure how you feel about it yet, and it feels weird. And like I think one of the reasons this premise works is because when you're that age and this is just kind of starting to happen to you, again, if you are somebody who got crushes in middle school, sometimes it can feel like boys are like speaking a completely different language. So I think that was an element that was really well written. I also think this book had some really interesting things to say about gender, which I really appreciated. Like, Emmy realizes that a lot of the information she's getting from the app is related to how insecure boys are about aspects of their appearance. And I really appreciate that this book talks about that, because that's something that I think still today, like, it's getting maybe a little better, but I think there's still a tendency to think that boys don't have to deal with that at all. And obviously that's not true, and I like that this book shows that. So yeah, I ended up really enjoying this. I think it was very thoughtful. I thought it was really fun too. There were one or two like subplots or side characters that I didn't enjoy like quite as much, or I didn't find quite as interesting. Like Emmy's younger brothers, for example, are like super irritating because like they have their own like secret like made up code language between them, and I get why it's there for plot reasons, but I think we still could have had like, I don't know, less of them, or maybe it could have been a friend character so we didn't have to spend so much time with them. It was just obnoxious to have to read that as dialogue, so that was like kind of a pet peeve, but it wasn't like a big deal. And then the other thing was Emmy's friend Harper, who is the Harriet Smith character. I had mixed feelings about that because like there's something that happens at the beginning of the book. I don't want to say it's like unreasonable that Harper reacted the way she did, like, because I get why, and I do think that there were other issues in their friendship that they had to deal with, but the specific thing that Harper is upset with Emmy about, like, I don't think it was entirely fair. And I get that they're 12, and like even people who are older than that, it's like we definitely get upset about things even when they're not somebody's fault, you know, they were just involved in them, so I get that. But I was just surprised at how quickly this conflict got really serious because of something that was not actually Emmy's fault at all. Although on the flip side of that, I actually think that friendship like fight or like conflict was really, really well described. Like I really felt for Emmy, and like as the reader I could really see how close Emmy and Harper were and how much this friendship meant to Emmy. Like it was really heartbreaking to see her go through that. So I think it was really well described. I just like wish it would have been done, like I wish that conflict would have been set up differently or more convincingly. But anyway, I did really enjoy this. I don't think you have to be a Jane Austen like fan or like know a lot about her in order to read this. I think if you are, like, I think if you do know Emma, you're gonna pick up on some fun parallels between them. But I don't think you need to know that story or anything. And I gave I Speak Boy 4 stars. Next, I finished Misfit in Love by S.K. Ali. This is the sequel to Saints and Misfits. And we're following our main character, Jana, and her brother is getting ready to get married. Like, so they're, like, the family and, like, a lot of friends are together for this reason, like, to get ready for the wedding or the engagement ceremony. And one of the main elements of the synopsis, which my friend Hannah mentioned, like, she thinks maybe it was mismarketed a little, and I agree, like, because it kind of makes it feel like the romance, like, Jana's romantic choices are going to be, like, a big focus of this book. And they do form part of the plot, but I don't think it was enough, like, I don't think that's, like, the main point of the book. So we're following Jana as she still deals with the PTSD from being sexually assaulted in the first book. That's not like explicitly described in this book, but there are references to that, and she's obviously still affected by that. She's also dealing with some family issues. There's also discussions of like a lot of important topics in this book. This book touches on environmentalism. It touches on anti-Blackness. I think it just covers a lot of topics very thoughtfully. Even though it is a pretty short book, I think it did those very well. I also really appreciate the discussion of different family members having different levels of like religious belief or observance. I thought that was really thoughtful. And this is another one where I liked a lot about it, but there were a couple of like, not big things, but like there were a couple of like somewhat significant things that didn't work for me as much. And I think part of it too is like, I love S.K. Ali. Like S.K. Ali is like a favorite author for me. Like I loved Saints and Misfits. I loved Once Upon an Eid. I really, really loved Love from A to Z. So I like probably went in with really high expectations, and like this book was still very good, but it just wasn't as amazing as I think her other books were. But I'll start off with the good things. So I really love Jana as a main character. I have a hard time explaining why I love her so much. Like, I don't know, like I connect with her emotional messiness in like certain ways. And I really like how close she is with her family. I also really like the writing in this book. Like I just really enjoy S.K. Ali's writing style. I also really loved some of the family relationships or the friendships in this book. Like, I love Jana's relationship with her sister-in-law. It is so lovely. I loved that part of the book. I love that we get a cameo from Zainab from Love from A to Z. I really enjoyed seeing Jana and her brother's relationship, like seeing that I think strengthened in this book. And like I said, I think this book did a really great job of touching on a lot of different topics like environmentalism and anti-Blackness and just like, I think this book did a lot. And I know that one of the complaints about contemporary books can sometimes be that they deal with too many issues. I don't know, like I don't tend to have that issue with contemporaries anyway, but I didn't have that one with this book either. What I will say though is I think this book tried to do too much with like character arcs or like changes of heart. Like, I don't know, I just think there wasn't enough time spent on some of the character subplots. And part of that was related to the love interest angle, because we have 3 kind of possible love interests. I think there just wasn't enough time spent on developing the relationship with, especially the, I think, love interest who we were supposed to like more. And especially because like the way he was introduced, like the way he talked to Jana just like really irritated me. And I like, it's funny because there are other characters I've liked who have been much grumpier, but for whatever reason, the specific way he talked to Jana just like pissed me off. Like I didn't like that. And so like that negative first impression and second impression lasted for most of this book. Like by the end of it, I did like him a lot more, but it almost felt like he was introduced as a different character than what he really was. Which I know like people, like your first impression of someone can be incorrect, but it was just, I don't know, I wish he had been introduced differently because I had kind of a negative opinion on him for most of the book, and I think we were supposed to like him like more than I did for most of it. And then also just having too much going on with some of the character, not even conflicts, but again like changes of heart. Although there was one element related to like a family conflict that I think the book did a really good job of like setting up how things could get better and they were working on it, but it's not like an easy fix problem. So I did appreciate that. I feel like this was a very rambly review, but basically I did really enjoy this. I do definitely recommend it if you enjoy this author. It's definitely like, if you've read Saints and Misfits, I would definitely say read Misfit in Love. But yeah, it just wasn't my favorite work by SKLE. And I gave Misfit in Love 3.75 stars. And then the last book I finished in July was Tokyo Ever After by Miko Jean. This is the first book in a series, and it has kind of been pitched as like a Japanese-American version of The Princess Diaries, which I think this book can definitely stand on its own. But if you are wondering about that comparison, I personally liked this way more than the Princess Diaries books. I tapped out of that series, I don't even know how far in, but I read quite a few of those books. Anyway, we're not here to review that series, but if you were wondering about how this book stacks up, for me personally, I liked it a lot more. And we're following our main character Izumi, and she finds out that she is actually the daughter of the heir to the Emperor of Japan. So yeah, I think her father is not the emperor, but he's like the next in line to be emperor. And so she ends up going, I think it's over spring break, so she goes to meet her father for the first time. And so the book is about Izumi getting to know her father better and trying to figure out kind of how she fits, because even though ethnically she is like full Japanese, culturally she feels too American when she's in Japan, but when she's in America she feels too like Japanese. And so she's kind of trying to figure out how she fits in, as well as like getting to know her father, and she's also trying to adapt to this new set of customs and trying to catch up on like learning all of these things so that she can like basically function in this high society world, because she's also being like kind of thrust into the spotlight. And yeah, like I said, I did really enjoy this. I think this is another book where like it's good to kind of set your expectations going in, because I know some people were disappointed in it because like they were kind of expecting like a more of like a fluffy YA romance, and really what this is like a figuring out who you are, figuring out how you fit in the world book with a romantic subplot. But I really liked that. I really enjoyed Izumi as a main character. I really liked her narrative voice, and she was just a fun character to read, even if like some of her choices I'm like, Izumi, this feels like a bad idea, but she wasn't like, she didn't do that so many times that it was like frustrating to read her, if that makes sense. And I did just find her a likable character. I also really liked the setting and like seeing Izumi explore Japan, and there's some specific scenes that take place in Kyoto that I really loved. I think that was really just beautifully done, and you could really feel Izumi's sense of like welcoming and like home there, and it was just really lovely. I also really loved the family relationships in this book and that kind of development. I love how close Izumi is with her mom and how much of a focus that is, even though she's not with her mom for a big part of the book. And I also really liked the way that her and her father are like slowly getting to know each other, trying to figure out how to interact with this person who is so closely related to them but is a stranger. And I think just those themes of trying to navigate the world and like fitting in, and especially Izumi as being very torn between these two cultures, and kind of like the way that other people make her feel torn. I think that element really came through in this book. And yeah, like I just really liked this overall. Really the only like negative for me was the actual romance subplot. It wasn't bad, like I didn't dislike it by any means, but it just like I didn't find it as compelling as like the other elements of the book for me. I would have either preferred like more setup for the romance, like more development and more like scenes with them in each kind of stage of them getting to know each other, or I would have liked the romance to be just kind of hinted at in this book and then explored in the next book. But that was really the only drawback for me. I did really like this, and it was interesting because as I was reading this book, I'm like, I don't really know where a sequel would go from here, but by the end of the book, I'm like really actually looking forward to the sequel, and I think this book did a really good job of like feeling full and complete and kind of like resolving some issues in this first book while also like I think leaving some room for a sequel, and I'm excited to see where that goes. So yeah, I gave Tokyo Ever After 4 stars. Okay everybody, so those were the rest of the books that I read in July. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!